So this guy decides he wants to join. He retires, and he wants to join a very, very waspy club, the Racket Club on Fifth Avenue in New York. So he wants to join this very, very elite club. He tells his friend, I'm retiring now. I'm going to join this racket club on the Fifth Avenue. He said, no way. They're not going to let you in there. A Jew. This is a very waspy club. They don't let non-Jews in. He says, don't worry. I'm going to get in. He hires a coach to teach him how to speak without the Yiddish, without the accent, to speak like a proper American. Comes the day of his interview, and he comes into the interview. They say, what's your name? My name is Bernard Vanderhaven. He says, like a perfect American, He says, and what's your wife's name? Betsy. Okay. He has, American names. What's your kid's name? Sue and Nancy and everything. So he asks him, so tell us, what religion are you? He wasn't ready for that question. So thinking very quickly, he says, what religion? Why, I'm Goyish, of course. So this actually fits a little bit to what we're going to talk about tonight, about the mentality of the Jews, that there's us and the Goyim, the nations of the world. And on Shavuos night, and some communities have on Shavuos day, we read the Megillah of Ruth. The story of, I'll tell you the background of the story in a minute, but in short, it's a story about a woman who decides to leave behind the place where she grew up, the place of her wealth, her family, to leave it all behind and to join the Jewish people. And when she leaves to join the Jewish people, what happens? She eventually becomes the great-great-grandmother of King David. And since Shavuos is the yahrzeit of King David, therefore we read the book of Ruth to remember the origins of where King David came from, the great-grandson of Ruth. In addition, Shavuos is the day when all the Jews converted. Every Jew standing at Mount Sinai had to go through a conversion process to become part of the Jewish people, which is for another discussion for another time. But we all went through a conversion with the mikvah, with the offering that Moses brought on the 5th day of the month of Nisan, the 5th day of the month of Sivan, and to re-feel that sense that we're all, so to say, converting and reconnecting and recommitting to God. We read the story of one of the most famous of all converts of the Jewish people, the story of Ruth. Okay. So good evening, everyone that's watching. Good evening, Shira. Good evening, Ravit. Good evening, Marsha. Good evening, Linda. Tonight I'm going to tell you not just the story of Ruth. In fact, a few years ago, we did a class on the story of Ruth. Tonight I want to tell you the story of two women, Ruth and her sister-in-law, Orpah. How the two of them started a journey on the same path, and then they came to a crossroads. And both of them had to make a decision that would impact their lives and the lives of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And Ruth went one way, and Orpah went the other way. And I want to talk about that moment and the impact of that decision and why they each made the decision they made, and more importantly, the impact of that decision. So tonight's not a class on one person. Tonight's a class about two people, Ruth and Orpah. And really, really, it's a class about us, because inside of us, we have moments in our life when we are like Ruth, and we choose the path of Ruth, and I'll soon describe. And many of us have moments in our life that we are like Orpah, and we choose the path that Orpah chose. So let's first start with the backstory, the story before the story. Then I'll tell you the story, the choice, and then we'll talk about the impact of these two stories. The story before the story is that there was a man called Elimelech. He had a wife called Naomi. He was a very important, illustrious person in the land of Israel. He was a wealthy person. He was from the dynasty of King David. He was a righteous person, a judge, a leader of the Jewish community. And it was during a time of famine for the land of Israel. Oh, Art had this was his bar mitzvah portion. Beautiful art. It was a big famine. And during this time of famine, there wasn't enough food for everyone in the land. And many people were trying to get food were desperate for food. And they were coming to this wealthy man, Elimelech, trying to get food from him. And so Elimelech felt, I have no choice but to leave the land of Israel and go somewhere where my fortune will be safe. And I don't want to get distracted on talking about Elimelech, because I originally thought about doing a class on Elimelech and Naomi, but it wasn't a happy class. And Elimelech made was really a wrong decision. I don't know of any rabbinic sources that justify what he did. He abandons the land of Israel. More importantly, he abandons his own people. He abandons the Jewish people, and he leaves and he goes off to the land of Moab. And there, why does he choose the land of Moab? The land of Moab was actually known to be stingy people. When the Jews were leaving Israel and we ourselves were slaves and being taken into captivity, the people of Moab wouldn't help us. And he goes to the land of Moab where they wouldn't judge him for being stingy. And there, his two sons, Machalon and Kilion, marry two princesses. Who are these princesses? Ruth and Orpah. Now, Ruth and Orpah are sisters. They're both princesses from the house of Eglon. Now, if you don't know the Tanakh very well, Eglon was a very famous king. He was a very fat king, exceedingly fat, with many, many layers of fat. He gave the Jews a hard time, and he was killed by a man called Barak, if I'm not mistaken, who, when he assassinated him, came into his chambers, saying, I have a private message from God for you, and I want to speak to the king in private. And the king trusted him. The king let him to come into his private chambers. And then when he was alone in the room with the king and nobody else, he took a sword that he had hidden in his cloak. He was a lefty. So when they searched him before he came in, they searched, normally a righty pulls a sword out of his left side. But because he was a lefty, his sword was hidden on his right side. So they didn't see the sword that he had hidden on the opposite side of his body. He used his left hand to pull out the sword from his right side. He stabs Eglon, and the Tanakh describes that Eglon was so fat that the layers of fat completely covered the sword, and the sword got lost in his body. He couldn't pull it back out. I know you wanted to know that detail, right, Marsha? If you're paying attention, that's a nice hello, Hadassah. How are you? So the sword got lost in his body, literally, and he killed him. He ran away, and the Jewish people were saved from this oppressor from the land, the king of Moab. His name was Eglon. But anyway, Eglon has these daughters, Ruth and Orpah. Princesses growing up in the palace of royal blood. Ruth, we are told, was exceedingly beautiful. She was a very beautiful woman. I'm assuming Orpah was also a very beautiful woman. They both came from, royal blood. They were princesses. And they marry these two Jewish boys that also came from royal blood, the sons of Elimelech, Machalon and Kilion, and they're married. Now, God runs the world, as we know. And God gives everyone the taste of their own medicine, and God brings around what comes around. And what happens to these people? Machalon and Kilion die. The sons that Elimelech took out of Israel die, both of them. Childless, they die young, without any children. In addition, Elimelech himself dies, leaving his wife a widow, leaving his two daughter-in-laws widowed, and not only that, all the wealth that he had brought with him to Moab is all lost as well. He becomes a very poor man. His wife becomes a poor woman. I honestly am not sure which one happened first, became poor and then died, or he died and then they lost the money. Either way, where our story, this is all the story before the story, okay? This is not even the story yet. This is the pre-story. Where the story starts, that's relevant for us, tonight anyway, because I'm just sharing one story. Where the story starts for us is after Elimelech has passed away. After Machalon and Kilion have passed away. After they're poor and penniless, and Naomi realizes there is no reason why I should remain in this land any longer. There's nothing here for me. I'm poor, I have nothing. And at least if I go back to the land of Israel, in Israel, someone will give me some food, someone will help me, something. Here, I have nothing. And so she makes the decision that she needs to leave the land of Moab, where she's currently living with her daughter-in-laws, leave them behind, and she is going to go back to the land of Israel, to where her family is. And that is where our story starts. So if you have the text in front of you, or if you're following my personal Facebook page or on our YouTube page, I'm going to share my screen so you can read it, or you can open up a book of Ruth and go to chapter 1 of the book of Ruth, verse number 8. That's where we're going to start from. Naomi said to her two daughter-in-laws, go return each woman to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the deceased and with me. Okay? So basically, she's telling to her two daughter-in-laws, I have nothing here. I'm going to go back to the land of Israel, but you have no reason why you need to remain with me. I have no sons holding you. There's no family. There's no grandkids. You can go back to your mother's house, which implies that they both shared the same father, but they didn't have the same mother. Understand? So I said that they were sisters. I should have been more careful in my language. They're half sisters, but they both came from the same royal family. You go back to your, and their father was killed. Their father wasn't alive. But go back to your mother's houses. Go back. You have family here. You have relatives here. And the Lord should deal kindly with you, etc. May the Lord grant that you find rest, each woman in her husband's house. Meaning, you'll find new husbands that were still young, still beautiful. You'll remarry. You'll find a new husband. You'll start a new life for yourself. And she kissed them, and they raised their voices and wept. Okay? How do they respond to this request of Naomi to go marry and find new husbands and make a new life? Verse number 10, they said to her, no, but we will return with you to your people. That's what they say. We will return with you to your people. And Naomi said, return, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they should be your husbands? Meaning, I can't give you any more husbands. I'm an old lady by now. There's nothing I can do for you to help you in your, you're young. You can still find men from here, from the local land of Moab. There's nothing I can do for you. I can't help you. Stay over here. Return, my daughters, go. For I have become too old to marry, that I should say that I have hope. And even if I did marry, and even if I had a husband tonight, and even if I had born sons, which won't happen, but let's say I could, would you wait for them until they grew up? Would you shut yourselves off for them and not marry? No, my daughters, for it is much more bitter for me than for you, for the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. So let's stop for a second and appreciate what's going on over here. In Naomi's mind, what's happening? What is Naomi saying? It's much more bitter for me than for you. In Naomi's mind, why is she suffering this terrible fate that she went from being a wealthy woman, married to a very illustrious, prominent member of the Jewish family with wonderful sons and daughter-in-laws, to being this old woman, poor and all alone? Because God is punishing her for what she has done wrong, right? She abandoned the Jewish people in a time of famine. She left them alone and left the land of Israel, going to the land of Moab, and God has punished her, and she's accepting her fate. She's not upset. She accepts. This is what is going to happen to me. I've abandoned my people. God has punished me. It is much more bitter for me than for you, for the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. But you young ladies, you have no reason to suffer together with me. It's not your fault that I'm being punished. So I'm being punished. I'm in this situation. You're young. You're beautiful. You have a future ahead of you. Go ahead. Build a life for yourself. There's no reason why you need to continue to stay together with me and bear in the brunt of my suffering, which is not your fault. Okay? How do these two ladies respond to her? So let's continue reading the story. So now we're holding verse number 14. And they raised their voices and wept again. Listen to these words. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth cleaved to her. These are important words. We're going to come back to these words again. So remember this. Vatishak Orpah l'chamoisa. Orpah kisses her mother-in-law, but Ruth dovka, but Ruth cleaved to her. And she said, Naomi says, lo, behold, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her God. Return after your sister-in-law. Okay? So Naomi is saying to her daughter-in-law, Ruth, why are you staying? Look at what your sister did. She has gone back to her family. She's going to make a future for herself. You also should go. And now we come to one of the most famous, powerful verses in all of Tanakh. Hands down, if you had to look like the top 10 verses of the Bible, this is one of the top 10. And Ruth says to her, do not entreat me to leave you, to return from following you. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. So may the Lord do to me, and so may he continue, if anything but death separate me and you. Yeah, very, 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 very powerful words. These are famous words, classic words. Wherever you go, I go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you die, I will die. Until death, we will not be separated one from the other. Now, obviously, this is a very, very powerful, powerful verse. But let's understand a few things over here. Both, when in the beginning, Orpah didn't want to leave her mother-in-law either. Correct? If you go back to the beginning of the story, they both are accompanying their mother. And by the way, they accompany their mother, they're in a state of total poverty. In fact, the verse says they were walking on the road, and the Talmud says that they were walking on the road. They didn't even have money for shoes. They were walking literally on the road. They were barefoot. They were walking with nothing. And they have nothing. And yet, Orpah is also willing to stay with her mother-in-law. So we make Orpah like Ruth chose to stay with Naomi. Orpah also chose to stay with Naomi. She also chose to stay. What happened? Naomi keeps on pushing her away. In fact, if you look carefully at the verses, how many times does Naomi try to push Ruth away? More than once. How many times? If you look carefully at the text, look at verse number 8, where Naomi says to her daughter-in-laws, go return to your mother's house, right? And then they say, no, we will return with you. So no, she says a second time in verse 11, return, my daughters, why should you go with me? And then they raised their voices and wept, and Orpah left. And now a third time, Naomi says to Ruth, look, your sister-in-law's returned. Go with her. And only after the third time, when then Ruth says, don't make me go, because wherever you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Only then does Naomi stop pressuring her daughter-in-law to leave, to stop going with her, and to allow her to join her. Meaning the Talmud tells us, in Yevamos, the Talmud tells us, from here we learn that when a person tries to convert, how should the rabbis treat that person? Push them away. Not once, not twice, 3 times. 3 times we see Ruth wants to convert. And so Orpah also wants to convert. Orpah also wants to join the Jewish people. She's also on the same journey as Ruth. But what happens? The first time she says, I'm going to go. But then after the second time that her mother-in-law says, don't go, she says, okay, I'll follow your advice. What you're saying makes sense. And what Naomi was saying does make sense. Naomi is saying logical things. I have no money. I have no children. I have no sons. I have no future for you. You have a future here in the land of Moab. This is where you grew up. This is where your family is known. Here you'll be able to find new husbands and build a new home for yourself. So Orpah is also on the journey of coming to Judaism. But she doesn't go all the way. Eventually, she listens to her mother-in-law and she turns. Now, before we talk about what she turns, if you also pay attention, it says that she cried. And if you look, my screen just froze me. If you look, they cry. Let's look something else over here a second. Let me share my screen again. And let's look carefully at how many times she raises her voice and she cries. How many times did Orpah cry? They raised their voices. Verse number 9, they raised their voices and wept. And then they raised their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. It says there's 4 times. There's 4 tears, because each time it says wept in plural. So each time there was 2 tears. And the rabbis actually tell us something very, very beautiful. You know what the rabbis tell us? If you turn the page over and you look skip a little bit in the Talmud, where Rava taught, as a reward, you see the paragraph that Rava taught? I'm jumping ahead, but as a reward for the 4 tears that Orpah shed in sadness over her mother-in-law, She merited 4 mighty warriors descended from her. As it is stated, and they lift up their voice and they wept again. I'm jumping ahead. Let's forget that for a second. The point is, Orpah is on the road with her mother-in-law. And more importantly, what else is Orpah doing? She's crying for her mother-in-law. She's yearning for her mother-in-law. And that's a very powerful thing. Orpah's crying for her mother-in-law. And then when they finally leave, what happens? Orpah kisses her, but Ruth cleaves to her. What's the difference between a kiss and cleaving? Cleaving means to be attached. Cleaving means to be attached. And the kiss is, I love you, okay. But then, we kiss each other goodbye. Like, I'm giving you a kiss goodbye, and now you go back to your home, and I'm going to go to my home. And a kiss is an expression of an emotional connection, but it's not a covenant. It's not a bond. I kissed you because I feel a connection to you. I feel some love to you. I feel some emotion for you. But I'm not attached to you. Look, go back, turn the page back. I'm jumping ahead. Turn the page back. Turn the page back to the verse I told you we're going to go back to. Verse 14. Verse 14. They raised their voices and they wept again. And then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth cleaved to her. You understand what's happening over here? Ruth doesn't just feel an emotional attachment or an emotional high. Ruth commits. She makes a covenant. So this is the difference between an emotion and a covenant. Between a feeling of spiritual connection, a feeling of bonding, a feeling of I'm inspired, versus I'm not just inspired, but I'm actually making a commitment to staying with it. Very, very different. Now, in Torah, everything matters, right? In Torah, everything matters. So when Orpah cries, that's an emotional energy. There's a light there. There's an energy. There's a strong emotional awakening where she's crying. And Hashem counts those tears. Hashem counts those tears. So this moment when she cries is considered a great moment. But you want to know what the danger is when the person gets inspired, when the person cries, when the person feels and recognizes something powerful, but they don't act on it. You know what happens after a high? Crash. Orpah experienced a high, and it's because she was a sensitive soul. Orpah is not a nobody. Orpah was always in the story. We talk about the story of Shavuos, and we always talk about Ruth. And Orpah was like an almost. And, every story has those people that almost were part of the story. Orpah was like the almost. She was Naomi's sister-in-law Ruth's sister-in-law that didn't really make it all the way. Orpah was also a very holy woman. Orpah appreciated the beauty of Judaism the same way that Ruth did. But she wasn't willing to commit. She wasn't willing to go all the way and keep the covenant. She wanted the beauty and the joy and the spiritual energy of, feeling Judaism, but she wasn't willing to commit to it all the way. And so what happens? After that, she crashes. And this is something which is very interesting to see, that sometimes people are very spiritual and very emotional and very intense. The same intensity and the same emotions that could be so holy could become a very, very strong, what do you call it, a guilt, an anger, a resentment, a feeling of insecurity, a feeling of I don't belong where I am. And they go with the same intensity the other way, the opposite direction. And so now I'm going to tell you, hopefully Marsha's watching and here's some rated R stuff. What happens to Orpah when she leaves? Good evening, everyone watching. Good evening, Gerald and Linda and Maria and Carmen and Linda. What happens after Orpah leaves? Again, we all know the story of Ruth. Does anyone know what happened to Orpah? You're not going to like it when I tell you. You're not going to like it when I tell you. Ready to find out?
Yeah.
So, my friends, we're going to read from the Talmud. So the Talmud should be really out of order. I'm going to read backwards. You see the paragraph says Rava taught, as a reward for the 4 tears Orpah shed in sadness, she merited 4 mighty warriors. 4 mighty warriors. Who are the mighty warriors? So one's very, very famous. Who's the most famous? You've heard of him. You've all heard. Who's the most famous giant that you know of in Goliath? So she marries 4 giants. 4 giants. Saf, Madon, Goliath, and Ishbi-Noiv. Saf, Madon, Goliath, and Goliath in English, in Hebrew it's called Goliath, in English Goliath, and Ishbi-Noiv. She marries 4 giants. But for those giants, it is written. No, I'll tell you the story, then we'll read inside. She leaves her mother-in-law. She's going back on the road back to Moab. The Talmud said, the Medrash Rabbah says, on the way she came upon the battalion of 100 soldiers from 100 different nationalities. And she opened herself up and she had sex with 100 different soldiers of 100 different nationalities. She allowed herself to be violated by 100 men in one night. In one night. 100 men. She allowed herself to be violated by 100 men in one night. She went from the pinnacle of almost becoming a Jew to going all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum.
So they killed her.
They didn't kill her. Didn't kill her. Sex with 100 women doesn't kill you. It's just I don't know, maybe a little sore after, but nothing. She wasn't killed. She had sex with 100 men in one night. Why? That's what I'm trying to say. After a high comes a crash. And the closer you come to a high, the greater the crash is afterwards. This is a general idea, and I've talked about this before, that sometimes the greatest sinners are the greatest people. And because, in general, you see like some people that make so high in their careers, they're such successful politicians, businessmen, etc., and they destroy their careers because they can't control themselves. Why? Because they have such power, such intensity, such ambition, such drive, such possibilities, if not channeled properly, becomes dangerous. Someone who's a regular person and never goes so high is never pulled so low. Orpah was so close to becoming one of the greatest women of Jewish history. And yet instead of becoming one of the greatest women in Jewish history, she becomes one of the greatest deviant women, having sex with 100 men in one night. Listen to what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that you can learn from a person's name a lot about them. Says the Gemara, what was her name? So some say it was written in Goliath, his mother was Harafa. This is a Gemara in Sota. Another place are in Orpah. And the Gemara explains that this is the same woman. Rav and Shmuel engaged in a dispute. One of them said her name was Harafa. Why is she called Orpah? Because everyone came at her from behind and sodomized her. Orphin. Orph is the back of the neck. Orph is the back of the neck. And one said her name was Orpah. Why was she called by the name Harafa? Because everyone threshed her like groats. When you want to thresh wheat and you throw it and you throw it up or whatever, that's how everyone treated her. They threshed her. They put their seed into it. They were plowing. They were planting. The point is, her very name shows that she became so promiscuous, so with such abandon, that she became in ways we can't imagine. And this is a woman that almost became perhaps the great-grandmother of David. I don't know. She almost became one of the most important and influential Jewish women. And instead, because she didn't allow her spirituality to take her over the edge, she crashed all the way to the bottom. And that's why she's called Orpah. Others explain Orpah's orif is the back, the neck. But not just that she turned her back of her neck to her mother-in-law, but she allowed herself to be violated from the behind by hundreds of men, or she allowed herself to be like a threshing floor for all these men to do with her as they wish. And what's born from that? Giants. Giants. Giants who have a huge body, but no spirituality. What's Goliath? What defines Goliath? Goliath has a huge, mighty body with no spirituality, with no soul. From that act of absolute physical abandon, where she allowed herself to be like a threshing floor, where she allowed her body to literally be an open, well, I don't know how to say it. No, you'll figure it out. For anyone that wanted. From that night comes not one, not two, not three, but 4 giants, each one a threat to the Jewish people, each one like Goliath, who are strength without holiness, their power without any humility or any surrender. They have this tremendous, great physical power and greatness with no spiritual, counterparts. Their bodies without a soul. And that is the story of Goliath. He's this massive, bulking, intimidating, scary, confident giant who stands before the Jewish people. And what does he do? He curses them. And he mocks them. And he makes fun of them. He terrorizes them. Where did he get that kind of personality from? From the intensity of his mother that allowed herself to fall so low that she became a threshing floor to 100 men.
So why would you use the word she merited?
She merited.
It's like a weird word. Like, I wouldn't say that would be a good thing. It doesn't sound like a good thing.
She merited. At the end of the day, they were giants, though, right? They had tremendous power. They used that power like their mother. They used that power in a harmful way. She still merited to have kids, and each one of those kids was a blessing, was a gift from God. I don't know if I call that a blessing, but each of them was a gift from God. And by the way, that gift from God was in exchange for her crying 4 tears for her mother-in-law. As I said before, the tears of a person don't go to vain. So because she cried for her mother-in-law, and she felt a sense of remorse and a sense of sadness that she wasn't going with her mother-in-law, that translated into something, but it didn't translate into holiness. It translated into just intensity. What are tears? What are tears? They're intense emotions that have no way of you cry when you can't verbalize. That's what a tear is, right? A tear is such a strong emotion. I'm overwhelmed. It could be sadness. It could be joy. I'm crying tears of emotion because the feeling I feel at this moment is so intense and so powerful, I can't contain it in the vessels of my body. I can't contain it in my verbal, conscious thought processes. It's too intense for me. So it just bursts out in this emotion, in these tears. Orpah had such a strong intensity at that moment. And that's why she cried. And each one of those tears that she cried, each of those moments of intensity and of powerful longing and yearning for her mother-in-law that didn't carry through all the way into a commitment and a covenant with the Jewish people, became another giant of tremendous power and intensity with no vessel, with no spirituality. Tears are grief and love, and we don't have words exactly. You understand?
But I have a question. How about Ruth?
I want to say one more thing before I forget, and then I'll take a question. By the way, there's another thing she merited. Why did Goliath have the right for 40 days to mock the Jewish people? What did Goliath do? The story of Goliath, everyone knew she was classic. Goliath, for 40 days, stands and mocks the Jewish people till King David comes and throws a slingshot and kills Goliath. Why did God allow him to mock the Jewish people for 40 days? Because it says she walked 40 steps with her mother-in-law. When they were leaving the city, Orpah walked 40 steps with her mother-in-law till her mother-in-law convinced her to turn around. And for each one of the 40 steps that she took with her mother-in-law, she merited to another, her child merited another day of, so to say, divine protection, where he was able to mock and curse the Jews until King David would come and kill them. You understand? Those 40 steps she took towards Judaism, those 40 steps she took towards the land of her mother-in-law, even though they didn't go all the way, are 40 steps that are kept in record above and are returned back to her family, and that her family is rewarded for. So those 40 steps are 40 holy steps. 40 steps towards an unbelievably holy goal and mission to become part of the Jewish people. And those 40 steps are rewarded with 4 giants that just don't appreciate, they don't understand the spiritual blessing they have, and they utilize it in a very, very unholy way. Very unholy way. What was your question, Hadassah?
For example, Ruth, how she get that kind of emunah bitachon, so she trusts in the mother-in-law or in Hashem, because
No, she trusts in Hashem. Her mother-in-law is the one that taught her about Judaism.
But in the
Okay.
for example, 15 say, and she say, law, his sister-in-law has returned to her people and to his gods.
Yeah.
Restore after your sister-in-law.
Yeah, because they were Moabites. Well, they had other gods. She wasn't Jewish yet, so she could go wherever.
So she has
Yeah. Okay. Now, yeah, there were many giants. Yes, Stephanie, there were 4 giants. Yes. Now, I'm going to tell you soon the story. You know what? We'll tell you the story now, and I'll go back to the ending about the difference between Ruth and Orpah. So what ends up happening to Orpah at the end of her life? So there were 4 sons that she had, 4 giants. One of them was Yishbi ben Noiv. And Yishbi ben Noiv, one day, happens to see, it says in this Gemara, that David was chasing after a deer, to catch the deer, and the deer ran to the land of the Plishtim. And this giant, who's David's, like, I guess, cousin, whatever, sees David. He sees an opportunity to kill the king of the Jewish people. And he's a giant. He grabs David. He ties him up. He's about to take this huge press from the olive press, a huge beam that they used to crush the olives in the olive vat and to crush King David's skull. And God does a miracle, and the ground sinks beneath David, and he's protected in the earth. And at that time that he's lying there in the ground, Avishai, if I'm not mistaken, who's one of David's generals, sees a dove. He was bathing for Shabbat, sees a dove flapping over his head, and he realizes a sign of danger. So the dove is compared to King David, to the Jewish people, and the dove is flapping over my head. The Jews are in trouble. So he runs quickly to the house of the king, to King David. He said, "Where's King David?" He said, "We don't know where he is." So he knew he was in trouble. So he takes the horse of King David. He asks the rabbis, "Am I allowed to take?" He says, "A normal person can't ride on the king's horse. But what if you're using the king's horse to save the king's life?" He knew the king was in danger. So to save the king's life, you're allowed to use the king's horse. He got on the king's horse, and the king's horse took him right to where the king was. Somehow the horse knew it was a miracle. And they came, and on the way as he was going, he meets Orpah. Avishai, the general, meets Orpah. And when Orpah sees Avishai coming to save her son, David, she was spinning. So she was spinning a thread or whatever with a spindle. And she threw the spindle at the general trying to kill him. And she missed. And so she says to Avishai, "Give me, young man," or whatever, exact language, "give me back my spindle." He picks it up and he throws it at her and he kills her. And then, when he comes to where King David is, Avishai, Yishbi ben Noiv, the giant, sees now there's 2 against 1. So he wants to run away. So he takes David, he throws him up in the air to land on a spear. He put a spear in the ground, threw him up in the air, and he thought that David would fall and land on the spear and die, and he would be able to run. At that moment, this general said the name of God, and David remained suspended in the air. He didn't fall. And Avishai says to David, pray to God to save you. And David prays, and God saves him, and he doesn't fall on the spear. And they say to Yishbi B'Naiv, they're running away, they're chasing after Yishbi. And so the general says to Yishbi, go look for where your mother is because I killed her with a spindle. And when he hears that his mother had been killed, his strength left him, and he lost his strength to run, and they were able to kill him also. So Orpah was actually killed on the same day as her son by the general of King David. And what happened to Goliath? He was killed by King David. We know the famous story, how Goliath comes and kills King David. And not only does David kill King Goliath, David kills the other two giants, the other two sons of Orpah as well. And in fact, the Talmud tells us as follows. Talmud tells us, look at this closing line of the Talmud. Talmud says, look at the very bottom of the page, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Yitzchak, to the Holy One, blessed be he, says that the children of the one who kissed, referring to the four giants descended from Orpah, will come and fall into the hand of the children of the one who cleaved. The extra words are explanation. God says, let the children of the one who kissed come and fall into the hand of the children of the one who cleaved. Meaning David, who came from Ruth, that cleaved to her mother-in-law. And by the way, what happens to Ruth? Ruth will live a very, very long life. She would end up meeting Boaz, which is a whole other story for another night. Maybe after Shavuos. She ends up marrying Boaz. Again, it's a whole story in the book of Ruth that we read on Shavuos. They end up having a child whose name is Oved. Oved has a child whose name is Yishai. Yishai has a child whose name is King David. Well, his name was not King David, it was just David. Jesse, yes. Obed in English has a child called Jesse, and Jesse has a child. He has 7 children. He has 6 children, and then later he has a 7th, 6, 7, and he has a 7th child. It's literally the way it is. There were 6 children. The 7th came later. There's a whole story, which is not for tonight. Maybe another week I'll tell you the story. I've done a class on this also, on how David was born. The scandal of David's birth was a very scandalous, and this David will become the king. Ruth will live several hundred years. She will live to see her son David, her great-grandson David, become the king. She would even live to see his son Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, become the king. And in fact, it says that King Solomon made a special throne in his throne room, in his chamber, where his great-great-grandmother Ruth was able to sit in his room. And that's the nacha she had to not only see her great-grandson as a king, but her great-great-grandson. Okay. And now I want to address this difference between Orpah and Ruth. And the life story of Orpah, as we just said a little bit quickly, ending up in a tragic way where she's killed, and her 4 mighty giant sons are all killed by David and his generals. And so now we need to understand the story of Ruth and Orpah, the story in the story, why one stays and one doesn't. So Talmud tells us many laws about conversions and how we deal with converts from this dialogue between Ruth and their mother-in-law Naomi. First of all, we talked about the 3 times of rejection. We have to reject the person multiple times until they really, really prove that they're really sincere and really committed to doing what the Torah says. And if they're not fully committed, then they can't join the Jewish people. Meaning Orpah could have almost joined, but she didn't have that commitment. But we're going to get there. But then also, the Talmud says you need to teach them all of the detailed laws, all the restrictions, all the reasons why Judaism is very difficult. Meaning, in Judaism, there's a lot of love. And if you listen to classes and you read online, what we discover about Judaism, the values, the ethics, the beauty, Shabbos, a time of peace, a time of love, a time of connection, a time of family, God, spirituality, purpose in life, not only making money, etc., etc. There are many, many beautiful, inspiring, uplifting ideas found within the Jewish faith and Jewish religion. But there's also many, many detailed laws and many, many strict restrictions and many challenges and many things that you can't do if you're a Jew. And so after Ruth says to Naomi, I want to stay with you, and after Orpah already left, Naomi starts telling Ruth all of the challenges she's going to have as a Jew, all the laws she's going to have to keep if she's Jewish. Let me share my screen. I'll go through them one by one. She says to her, no, I'll tell it to them. We'll read the text. If you want to read it inside, look at verse 16. This is all Rashi brings this from the Talmud. Ruth said, do not entreat me to leave you, to return from following you. Forever you will go, I will go. What is she referring to? Wherever you will go, I will go. And then she says, wherever you will lodge, I will lodge. That's number 2. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you die, I will die. It's 5. Let's go through them. Okay? So number 1, she says, Naomi says to her daughter, you should know that Shabbos is a beautiful time. It's a wonderful holiday and all that, and time for family. But guess what? On Shabbos, you're not allowed to go out of the Tchum of Shabbos. The Tchum is a 2,000 cubit measure in the limits of the city, and you're not allowed to travel on Shabbat. So yeah, at the time, we sit together Friday night with a beautiful family, with a dinner, with the candles, and it's very beautiful. But then on Shabbat, you can't travel outside the city. Today, the cities are huge, and today we have cities going to other cities. But in regular, ancient times, you lived in the city, you couldn't go travel to the next city, even though it's only a half hour away. More than 2,000 cubits, it's like a half a mile, you can't go. So if you're going to become a Jew, you're going to be restricted on Shabbos. You can't travel. And what does Ruth say to her mother-in-law? Wherever you go, I will go. The same restrictions that you take upon yourself that you won't travel on Shabbos, I take upon myself as well. Then Naomi says to her daughter-in-law, you should know that as a Jew, there are laws of yichud, laws of being alone, secluded with someone of the opposite gender. A man is not allowed to be alone with a woman. Even if he's married, even if he's not married, even if she's married, not married. Adultery is a married woman. Any man is not allowed to be alone with a woman. And so it's a restriction, it's a challenge. All of these laws where men and women have to keep boundaries, not touching, not being secluded, etc. Now, in your culture, Moab was a very promiscuous society. You can be secluded with a man. You don't have to worry where you are. If you're going to become a Jew, you're going to have to be careful about the laws of yichud, the laws of being alone in a place with the opposite gender, with a man. And what does she respond? Wherever you will lodge, I will lodge. Wherever you'll sleep, I'll sleep. If you won't sleep there, I won't sleep there. I accept upon myself all the restrictions that come with being a Jew. So then she says, you should know besides for all the positive mitzvot, there's 613 commandments. Includes 365 negative commandments, 365 other laws. Many, many laws, many restrictions. And she says, your people shall be my people. Your God shall be my God. All the laws that you have and how you have to treat your people, the laws of charity, and the laws of all the restrictions in your people, and all the restrictions come from the Torah, etc., I take them upon myself. So Naomi says to her, guess what? There's some laws that if you violate them, you know what the punishment is? Death. If you violate Shabbos, you get stoned. If you violate these laws, you'll be killed by the Beis Din, by the court. You sure you want to accept upon yourself a religion where you'll be liable to the death sentence if you violate certain laws? And what does she answer? Where you will die, I will die. I'm even willing to become a Jew, even if that means that I'll be liable to the death sentence for violating a prohibition in the Torah. And that's when she says, if so may the Lord do to me, and so may he continue, if anything but death separate me and you. Meaning all the laws of not traveling on Shabbos, the laws of not being secluded with another man, the laws of all the negative commandments of the Torah, all the laws, even of the death sentence, I'm willing to accept them all upon me. And so may the Lord do to me, and so may he continue, if anything but death separate me and you. Meaning, more important than even living, more important than anything I have, is to be together with you and your people and your God. And this is the difference between Ruth and Orpah. Orpah was a very spiritual woman and a very uplifted, deep woman who appreciated the beauty of Judaism. She's not a nobody. She's not an almost was. She's a royal blood, a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law of the royal family. She appreciated Judaism. She appreciated Naomi. She cries sincere tears, not fake tears. You know, America, we do fake tears. Oh, so it's like, there are real tears. So real that God rewards her for those tears. And the 40 steps she took with her mother-in-law, God rewards her for those 40 steps. They were sincere, deep, legitimate yearnings of a wise, religious, righteous woman that wanted to get closer to God. But she couldn't make herself come to the point of a covenant where she says, I will do it no matter what. Where I'm committed, where I'm cleaving, where I'm one with you, where this becomes my identity. So I'm glad to look and to watch and to celebrate my own version of Shabbat, to celebrate my own version of spirituality, but to cleave, to give up everything I have and go into an unknown future, that I'm not willing to do. And that's when Orpah turns her back. That's the oref, is the back, is the neck. And she then, once she turns her back, the intensity of light that she almost revealed in the world became an intensity of darkness and of violence with the giants that she gave birth to. But this is the difference. This is the difference. Orpah says, I'll kiss you. And the kiss is a moment of attachment and love. But Ruth said, I will cling to you. Clinging means this is my identity. This is my very life. This is who I now am. This is part of me. When you kiss someone, the kiss of Orpah means I'll be Jewish when I feel like it. When it makes me feel good, I'll be Jewish. But when it becomes too hard, I'll do my own thing. The cleaving of Ruth says, no matter if it's easy or hard, I'm going to stay true to Judaism. And that's why David wins the war against Goliath. Because David is the ultimate of surrender and humility before God. Goliath is power, he's might, he's strong, he's a giant. But what was he lacking? Surrender to God. He was mighty. He was spiritual, or his mother, Orpah, was spiritual. She had tremendous feelings of love for God, but she couldn't bring it into a commitment, into a covenant. And so when Goliath comes to war, how does he come to war? He says, look at me. And when David comes to war, what does he say? Look at my God. Goliath is all about what makes me feel good. Look at my power, my strength, my size, my might. And what does King David say when he comes with a slingshot? He says, I come in the name of God. Those are the words of David. Hadassah says I'm saying the truth. I know, it is true. I've said it before. David comes and says, I come in the name of God. It's not about me. It's not about my size or my power or my might. I inherited the DNA of my great-grandmother who taught me that it's not about how you feel. It's about God. I'm committed all the way. Yes, Stephanie, you can't pick and choose. I'm committed all the way. And that's why the Gemara says, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and says, let the children of the one who kissed be conquered by the one who cleaved. Because the children of the one who kissed, yeah, they had an inspiration. They had a moment of tears. They had a moment they came on Yom Kippur and it was a beautiful service and they felt so proud to be a Jew. And then they went home and they went back to wherever they went. And Ruth came and she cleaved. And Ruth said, I'm here forever until death. There's nothing that will take me away from my new identity. And that's what it was. So my friends, I said that really that's the story. But I told you in the beginning that story is really a story inside us. Because we have moments in our life where we have inspiration. We have to make a choice. We're at a crossroads. And we can choose to be like Ruth. And we can choose to make a commitment and a covenant that's not necessarily logical or intellectually sound, or that we see what will happen in the future. And sometimes we could choose to be like Orpah. And we can feel sad and we can cry, but then we go back to what we see, to what makes sense, and we don't make the commitment. How many times have we experienced moments of inspiration, moments of, we're almost there. We're almost there. We walked 40 steps already. We walked 40 steps. And we got past the first rejection. And now comes yet another rejection, yet another challenge, another struggle. And this time we say, you know what? It's true. The rejection is correct. That person that said I can't do it, the person that put me down, they're probably right. Ruth didn't see one day King David coming out of her, or Shlomo HaMelech coming out of her, what the future would be. What did she see? Poverty. She's walking barefoot on the road with a woman that has no future. She didn't see what would happen. She sees poverty, she sees loneliness, she sees the people that may not accept her. And yet, she went. And Orpah, she cried, and she gets credit for crying, but she couldn't make the covenant. She couldn't cling. And that's the difference between Ruth and Orpah. Ruth began as a Moabite, but she became the mother of the Jewish people. And that's the story for us coming into Shavuos. Because if you think about it, what's really the Shavuos story? The Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai, and God came to us, and God said, do you want the Torah? And what did we say? We didn't think it through. What will we have to do? What's going to be involved? What's the requirements? How much will it cost? We surrendered to God. And on Shavuos, the Jewish people said, Na'asa v'nishma. What does that mean? We will do, and then we'll understand. The Jewish people didn't just cry tears and say, oh, I'm a good Jew in my heart. The Jewish people committed to a covenant. And so on Shavuos, when we are re-inspiring in ourselves this covenant of Na'aseh v'nishma, where we're saying to God, I'm yours no matter what. Where you go, I will go. Where God tells me to go, I will go. And where God will do to me up till the end, till death, I'm committed to God. That's why the story of Ruth is a story to re-inspire within ourselves the ability to commit to a covenant with God himself. That, my friends, is a story of Ruth and Orpah and the two women at the crossroads. Both went so far, but one went all the way, and one just gave a kiss and cried, but then went back, all the way back. Okay, my friends. Good night, Laila Tov. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Marsha. Thank you, Stephanie. I don't know what full send means. Thank you, Barry. I'm glad you enjoyed it. All or nothing, yes. Good evening, Joe from Olympia. Good evening, Clifford from Chicago. Good evening, Dr. Cliff. Good evening, everyone. Okay, it's worth starting late. Yes, it was a Laila Tov. Shavuos night. We'll see you all B'ezrat Hashem Shavuos night. Friday, 11 a.m. is 10 Commandments. 10 o'clock services, 11 o'clock 10 Commandments. Probably a beautiful dairy lunch. On Shabbos, we're going to have a beautiful lunch as well. Thank you to Stephen and Michelle and Rivka Dvora. And Marsha, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed. We're going to miss you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you all. And next week, same time, same place. B'ezrat Hashem.